Today is a very, very sad day because today we are saying goodbye to our extremely wonderful Tesla Model 3. We got this Tesla Model 3, it's a 2022, we got it last summer, and at the time, Tesla had changed the rules where you could change your configuration without adjusting to the current pricing. So this was during the time of price hikes that were going through the roof. So essentially, my order was for a standard range Model 3, but I could upgrade to a long range Model 3 at the time and save about $7,000 compared to what it was selling for at the time. So this car, red on white, long range, would have sold for $60,990. However, I had a price locked in of $53,990. So it was a fantastic deal. Now I did $3,000 in additional options, which is the red and the white interior. So $53,990. It was a really good deal. $7,000 less than what it cost to order that at the time. However, as many of you know, not just at Tesla, but the used car market is completely different here a year and a half later. And Tesla is no exception to that. In fact, because of the significant price decreases over the last year, Teslas have really dropped in value significantly. So basically, rather than getting my money back out of this thing, I've actually lost quite a bit of money on this car. And although I had such a good price, I had such a hard time trying to sell this car. I was asking really good pricing for this car, in my opinion. And even there at the end, I dropped the price all the way down to $37,000, which is significantly less than what it would cost to get this car brand new, even with the tax credits considered. So even at a fantastic price, I still could not sell this car, and it was very frustrating because this is such a nice car, and I've taken very good care of this car as well. It's in great condition, and it has PPF, and it has some other goodies inside of it, but it didn't matter. The market is just very weird right now, and we do have a refresh Model 3 right around the corner. So all these things make it very challenging to convince somebody instead of waiting to take this car used. So ultimately, I started looking at the wholesale market, and I've usually had success there, but prices ranged between $31,000, and then the best price I got was from Carvana at $36,000. So I'm actually headed to Carvana right now to hand them the key cards for $36,000. So you do the math yourself, that's quite a hit. Now, on the bright side, I actually sold a standard range Model 3 to get this car, and I made quite a bit of money to do that. And that covered basically the whole cost difference of a standard range versus a long range. So I'm not down quite as much as just on paper, but still such a big hit. And that's just the reality. It's not just the Model 3, it's new technology, and being at the front end of the adoption curve, you are going to be opening yourself up to prices coming down over time. So the earlier you are, the more expensive it is for new technology. And here towards the end, and as it's starting to mature, prices obviously come down with that. So anyways, the point is, it's time to sell our Model 3, and we are very excited for what's coming next, and that is the Cybertruck, of course, but nobody knows exactly when they're going to get their Cybertruck. I'm not the first hour order holder of a Cybertruck reservation, so I have no idea if that even matters, but we don't know when we're going to get our Cybertruck. But I need to be ready because it's imminent, essentially, and I'm very ready for it, and I want to be able to have the cash in hand to buy it when it is time. That's the situation that we're in. Now, I want to talk about ownership of this car because it has been such a good car, but I've also got thoughts on this car versus the standard range, or what's now called the rear-wheel drive Model 3. So the lifetime efficiency of this car, 28,000 miles. We've consumed 7,484 kilowatt hours of energy and an average efficiency of 267 watt-hour per mile. Now keep in mind, I do a ton of highway driving, and most of our cars spend most of their life at a higher speed than just around town. So my efficiency is going to be a little bit worse than probably the average because it's predominantly over 60 miles per hour throughout its life. So 267 watt-hour per mile is not terrible. This thing's rated range is based on efficiency somewhere in the 240 to 250. So it's really not that bad. But with our standard range Model 3, it was even better. And that is kind of the story here. Is it worth getting the long range over the rear wheel drive? Well, in a winter climate, you might think I have to have the all-wheel drive. Now for us, we lived in a snow climate and we had no issues with a rear-wheel drive Model 3. The traction control system on these cars is extremely sophisticated, it's very good. And I just had the standard tires on. Now I had the Aero wheels, so these are all season tires, and it did really well. As long as you're not in the Arctic tundra, I don't really think you have to have all-wheel drive. So now the next question is it worth having all that range? The long range versus the rear-wheel drive that has significantly less rated range. Well, the rear-wheel drive Model 3 has actually had quite a boost in range over time. It has gotten pretty good. Now the charging speed in this long range is faster than the standard range. You can charge 250 kilowatts versus capped at 170 for the rear-wheel drive with the LFP battery, but on a day-to-day basis, you're supposed to charge 80 to 90% versus an LFP that can charge 100% every day. So really that delta in range is not that great. And especially with the new Model 3 that has less range than the one we have right here. So they switched to the LG batteries for the long range Model 3 not that long ago, and range was reduced down to about 333 miles of range. So quite a drop, over 20 miles less range with those other batteries, but it is still able to charge at 250 kilowatts and it is still more range. But on a day-to-day basis, that gap is not that big because I can charge 100% on LFP versus 80 or 90% on the long range Model 3. As I'm thinking about the overall ownership experience of this Model 3, it's been great. This car, it's just so simple. Maintenance, there's practically no maintenance on this car. And we still have the original tires, no issues there. We haven't really done any other maintenance to this car. We took delivery of it with no issues, and it's been like that since we've owned it. And it's a pretty awesome car. The Model 3 and the Model Y are just put together so well, and they're so simple. There's not a lot that really can go wrong with them. So the cost of ownership from a maintenance perspective on both the Model 3 and the Model Y is super low. And at the point that this car was built, I mean, we are 5 years into building these cars and they've really come a long way. The noise, as you can probably hear in this video, is a little bit louder than I would like, but it is certainly quieter than our standard range was. Now, there are some areas for improvement that are coming with the refresh. We're getting some new features like cooled seats, which is probably the biggest benefit of going with the new Model 3 that's coming. Those cooled seats are going to be really nice, especially if you're in a warm climate. But they're also getting some other things like ambient lighting, and that sounds so minimal, but quite honestly, the interior of this car can be very dark. And if you have the rear-wheel drive, you don't have floor lights, so it can be very, very dark inside of this car at night. So there are some improvements coming that are going to be nice to have with the refresh. And I think the refresh will be worth it because of the added functionality. This current Model 3 is starting to feel somewhat dated from a styling perspective. Not a lot has really changed with this car, certainly on the exterior. We have new wheel covers and new wheels that you can choose from, but they're very minor changes there. On the inside, and hardware related, you have an updated dashboard, you have a new center console, you do have a heated steering wheel, which is nice, and most importantly, the screen has been updated with a faster processor, and that has been really nice. Now, this is not hardware for a car, and that is the future, so the camera system is even better on the new cars, and the processing power of hardware 4 is even better for full self-driving of the future. Of course, there have been a number of software updates since we took delivery of this car, which is kind of cool, and that is a Tesla thing. This car has more capability today than the day we bought it, and there are very few cars that can say that they have more capability in their car than when they bought it new. Usually, anything that changes, you have to wait till the next model year to get it, and that's kind of always been how it's been done. You need to pay to upgrade, essentially, whereas with Tesla, they continue to develop and they continue to enhance the experience, and all those updates come straight to your car, giving you a very unique ownership experience when you get new capability in a car that's a year, 2, 3 years old, and it just continues to update over time. One of the big downfalls of the current Model 3 and the future Model 3 is you no longer have ultrasonic sensors, and I'm really not a fan of that. I have a new Model X that has no ultrasonic sensors, and they're pretty much useless at this point. Now, they are getting better. We finally actually have visualization of what's around the car, but it's all vision-based instead of the ultrasonic sensors, which are extremely accurate. And when you're in a tight parking lot or you're going in and out of the garage, I've always just used those as kind of a measuring stick of where I am in the garage, where to stop, where I'm parking. And on top of that, when you are driving around, the vision-only system is very sensitive, thinking you're going to hit everything that's near the car versus having absolutely no indication because you're not even close to anything. So a lot of work still yet to be done there, and I really wish that the ultrasonic sensors would not have gone away. Now, although this car has been great and it is a very fast car and very fun to drive, it has strong sport pedigree with how its driving performance is, how the handling is. It is just a fun car to drive. That said, I personally like the Model Y more than the Model 3, and the reason is pretty obvious. More space, and it sits higher, and really even just sitting higher is a big improvement over the Model 3. This car sits so low to the ground that you're really dropping into the car, versus with the Model Y, you really kind of step into it, you kind of sit right there. It's not hard to get in and out of. You actually have a bigger door even to get in and out of, and that's one of the things I talk about all the time, especially at superchargers. I see older folks often struggling to get in and out of the Model 3, understandably so, but when you see them get in and out of a Model Y, it is a completely different story, and it's that seat height. It's just so much more comfortable. On top of that, as a family guy, we have children, and having the added space is a huge benefit. You cannot even compare the storage space in this car to the Model Y. It is significant. Now, it does have a sub-trunk in this car, which is similar in size, and the frunk is much smaller, but it does have a lot more space than you would think. That said, the bigger version of this in the Model Y also has a lot more space than you would imagine. So in today's market, I would choose the Model Y every day. And even with a refresh Model 3 over a Model Y, I'd still pick the current Model Y over the refresh Model 3. It's just that much more utility of a vehicle. It just checks so many more boxes. I appreciate having this car, and unless you are buying the rear-wheel drive to save as much money as possible, it's hard for me to say I would choose a Model 3 again. Unless I was buying a performance Model 3, which is 0 to 60 in 3.1 seconds for a lot less money than anything else on the market. So other than that, now that we have the rear-wheel drive Model Y coming here in the United States, I mean, it's $3,000 more than the rear-wheel drive Model 3, and you get a ton more capability for that $3,000, and I think it's a no-brainer personally. So with that, this car has been amazing. It has been trouble-free. This particular car is technically the fastest Model 3 coast to coast in the world, and it has quite a bit of range, and it is just an easy car to road trip, just like all other Teslas. One last goodbye to such a good car. This is took 17 minutes, but that was because he had another customer here and another person stopped and asked him questions. So $36,000 and 17 minutes, done. So sad, such a good car, but somebody is hopefully going to buy that car and be pleasantly surprised at how good of a car they ended up getting. So I am going to miss this car, of course, but we are off to greener pastures and the Cybertruck is going to be an absolute game changer and I cannot wait to get it. So I thank you for joining us on this journey with our Model 3 and I look forward to the journey we have ahead of us with the Cybertruck. Thanks so much for joining today. We'll catch you next time.